Hello and welcome to my channel, The Fight for Truth. If this is your first time here, please note that I have several videos on the calendar and I post nearly every day. Some are truth nuggets about the calendar and some are just about scriptures in general. And so I hope that you will find truth along this journey with me. Today we're going to be discussing other calendars such as Lunar Sabbaths, Hebrew, Lunar, Luni-Solar Calendar, and then a couple of variations of the Zadok calendars. And yes, there are a couple of variations out there. So I know it's already difficult to decide which calendar to follow, but I'm going to give you a little summary on different ones and why I'm choosing to not follow those calendars. So with this video, I will never say that someone or a group of people are wrong and that they're sinning because they keep a different calendar. Believe me, I've had my fair share of people telling me that I have become a sinner because I am following the Zadok calendar or I'm following it in a different way. So there are groups out there who are bashing those of us who are choosing a different calendar, and I will never do that to my brothers and sisters. And we all come to truths at different times, and I'm not ever going to say that I am correct and you are wrong. This is just where I am today. And I've also had many groups reach out to me and ask me to talk about the Zadok calendar for this reason or that reason, but I've actually held off because of their disdain for what I think. And I've had some very rude comments, and it just doesn't seem like people that I would want to talk with. I don't think that it would be productive and not necessarily an environment that I want to deal with. So I don't feel that I have to defend what I believe in a debate. I'm just going to continue to present what I think and tell you how I got where I am today. And I will say that throughout this journey, I have found more evidence to the Zadok, Enoch, or Dead Sea Scrolls calendar than any calendar out there. I find the evidence for a Wednesday start for each year, and I find the evidence for a 364-day year and a 12-month only calendar. And I find that our ancients watched the Mazaros, the zodiacs, as well as the sun and the moon for their calendar. So if this is all new for you and you're still working on trying to figure out what calendar to follow, I suggest that you go to my playlist for the calendar and start there after watching this. Here we go. A little bit about me is that I am an avid researcher here. I am a wife of 22 years and a mother, and I became a Christian at 16, and I pursued the Father with everything that I had. I never took things at face value, though, because I realized that there's often much deeper meanings to it all, and even realizing early on that there was truth that was being hidden in every nook and cranny of life, right? We have all learned some kind of truth that we didn't know when we were younger. And as a Christian, I was constantly weeding out things spiritually. I even left the church when I realized that they were following doctrines of men, right? There was a time where I just started feeling that, I don't know if the pastor is always right, which is what we're taught. It's the kind of environment that we're brought up in. And I found out that, in fact, the pastors were part of the problem. And it didn't seem that they were digging for the truth. It seemed that they knew everything. And it was at face value. It had to be believed 100%. You had to ultimately trust in what your pastor's authority was. I mean, after all, he went to seminary, right? And he must know more than me. So, again, more weeding out through the years. And once I finally came to the Torah in 2019, I quickly found a treasure trove in the first book of Enoch, and I started following what I knew to be the Enoch calendar. And it lined up really well, and everything seemed plausible, right? It just fit correctly. It just seemed to fit. And I was listening to someone else's interpretation of the calendar, and it just seemed right. And then I actually started to dig into Enoch a little bit more. I opened up the Book of Jubilees, and I got myself a copy of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I soon found some connections, some more dots, connecting the dots, right? And while the Enoch calendar that I was following seemed good, it was actually missing some key elements. And then I started trucking along in my studies, and I found another group of people who were also putting things together, and they called it the Zadok calendar. And so I changed a bit to follow what they were doing, and what I found in most cases, they were following very similar things that I was already doing. And so we kind of bunch up the term Enoch calendar, Zadok calendar, Dead Sea Scrolls calendar, Jubilees calendar. We kind of put it all together, right? But then I found that there was inconsistencies of how everyone who's following the Enoch or Zadok or Dead Sea Scrolls calendar start their year. So this brought me to my new mission, because my husband and I were following, a start date based on what we were being told and what sounded plausible. But something wasn't connecting. We hear about people who are intercalating 5 years, 6 years, 7 years after this and after the equinox and so on and so forth. So I sought it out, and this is what my current understanding is today. And it did take me about 2 versions of a similar calendar to get to where I am today. And I think I have it down, but of course, as a Berean, I'm willing to change. And if some new evidence comes my way, I'm willing to look at it. And I actually have. And this is what I'm bringing to you today, is my studies into the other calendars, because I want you to know what's out there. No, we don't have to dig too deep. A few basics of these calendars will help you at least get started. So here is my reasoning for discounting all these other calendars and why I'm choosing to follow the one that I am. And I hope this can be edifying for those seeking his true calendar. And again, don't trust me. I'm going to give you some basics. Look it up, research it for yourself. Let's take a look here. So today we are going to be looking into the Lunar Sabbaths. You'll hear people calling themselves Lunar Sabbatarians. The lunar calendar, or Luni-Solar Calendars, some of them call it. The equinox years starts. So that is a group of people who say they're following the Zadok calendar, but they start their year with the equinox each year. And then there is another Zadok subgroup that have different intercalation methods than I do, and I'm going to be discussing that as well. So there are some problems with these other calendars, and here are calendars that are causing confusion in everyone. But there are some things that we need to point out at the fault of these calendars. There are calendars out there that have alternating Sabbaths or double Sabbaths, where they have 2 different Sabbaths being observed in the same day. There are those who say they believe Enoch and Jubilees are scripture, yet their calendar does not match either of them. And in recent years, we have found the Zadokites' way of keeping the calendar mentioned, if you followed my Dead Sea Scrolls, that it's mentioned in over 40% of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And their calendar is precise and fixed, and it doesn't vary. So it definitely does not use just the moon to determine the months, as we see in some other calendars. So we have some inconsistencies with the Dead Sea Scrolls and those who say they're following Enoch or Jubilees or the Dead Sea Scrolls Zadok calendar. So why do these things matter? Number one, the Father always has a pattern to everything. He is consistent in his ways, and he conveys order in everything, including the calendar. These books being revealed in these last days were prophesied about. Thus, I think it should hold more weight as we continue to seek the truth. So let's dig in a little bit. And again, I am not going in depth, and there's a lot more to these calendars, but I'm going to give you some of the basics. The Lunar Sabbath was a new concept to me. I had only heard of it in the last couple of years, and I didn't even know that there were people following this. I didn't know it existed. So when I heard about it, I didn't just brush it off. I'm not one of those people who just brush it off and say, oh, I'm right. I'm not even going to look into it. I do look into things, and I study it out so that I can make my educated interpretation, I guess you would say. So when I looked into the lunar Sabbaths, I thought that we needed to see why or what part or what, I don't know, I guess, section of our calendar includes the moon. Does Scripture include the moon? And we're going to take a look, number one, at what the lunar Sabbath keepers think. They believe that the first day of the year can be any day of the week. They believe that Sabbaths can be any day of the week. They can add a 13th month, and they do every so often. They say that the moon determines the month, and here's where I really had to look into how the moon fit in to everything in the calendar specifically. They do not have a 7-day cycle. They'll say they do, but we'll get into that in just a few moments. They also have Sabbaths that can overlap with feast days, and they only use the moon for their calendar. They do not look into the sun or the stars or anything of that matter. They have something called non-days, and we'll get into that in a bit. And their year is 354 days because we know that that is the cycle of the moon if you've read Enoch. And they can also, when they add their 13th month, can have up to 384 days. All right, so lunar Sabbath keepers are different than lunar calendar keepers. So Luni-Solar Calendar keepers, Hebrew, what they call the Hebrew calendar, this is different from that. And lunar Sabbath keepers keep their Sabbaths on a new moon. So if we're looking over here at the phases of the moon here, we have the new moon, we have a first quarter moon, we have a full moon, and we have a last quarter moon. So they follow their calendar and their Sabbaths only on those 4 phases of the moon. And so there's a lot more to their calendar. They have, let's see here, let me show you. So this is what I would say would be the full moon. This would be the last quarter, new moon, first quarter moon. So I'm going to try to explain this without really confusing you. There's a lot to this calendar. They have interruptions in their calendar weeks, and they have those non-days I was talking about, and multiple Sabbaths in a row. We're going to show you here. So this was March 2025, and this is their calendar that they're following. Now, March 1st, 2025, they actually had this was one of the years where they had the 13th month. So their new moon was on Saturday, the 1st of March. Now, this is what's called a non-day. It's neither a Sabbath nor a work day. It's just a non-day. They act as if it doesn't even exist, even though they're living in that day. They do not count this day in their calendar. So their Sabbath is 7 days from the new moon. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Again, they didn't count this day. So here is their Sabbath on the next Saturday. And then they count 7. Great, they're doing the 7 pattern. That's great. And then they count another 7 and have their next Sabbath. And then they count another 7 days and have their Sabbath. It all looks great. They're all having their Sabbaths on Saturday. This is March of 2025. And then we have a conjunction. So this is where the moon is not visible in the sky. This is on their last Sabbath here. And so when a new moon happens, the conjunction, the next day is their Abib 1. This next day is the first day of their month. Yet they don't count a day where there is a new moon. So they're not going to count this day, which is really odd. And so I'm going to go to their next, let me see here. I'm going to go to the next page. This next page is April. So they counted their 7 days from Abib. Remember, it was on a Sunday. So they didn't count Sunday. So they count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's very interesting. So there's 6 days. And then they have a Sabbath. And then they count 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then they count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So they have 7s, right? But look what's happening because, let me go back a page. Because they didn't count this day, they counted this next day, which is the day after the new moon. It would be, they call it a 7-day pattern, even though it doesn't seem like it. Let me go to the next page. So they didn't count it when it was on Sunday. So they're only counting it here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I counted wrong the first time, sorry. So what we're noticing here is in March, they actually had all their Sabbaths on Saturday. But look where their Sabbaths are for April. They're on Sundays. And then they're going to go through their 7 patterns. And then something happens here. So then at the end, they have the conjunction. So again, it's on a Sabbath where there's new moon, which is the non-existent moon you can't see. Well, it's existent. It's still there. And then they don't count this next day, this new moon day. They don't count it in their 7s. So then they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So here we are in May. And look where their Sabbaths are this time. They're on Mondays. So we went from Saturday Sabbath for 1 month, Sunday Sabbath for the 2nd month, Monday Sabbath for the 3rd month. And then they have these non-days. So they say that it's not a Sabbath and it's not a work day. It's just called a non-day. Quite interesting, right? So this is a huge problem. So if you haven't watched my other video called The Sabbath Has Never Changed, I encourage you to do so as I addressed the scriptural and historical evidence that shows that Saturday Sabbath has always been Shabbat. And I have serious questions about this Sabbath keeping. So legitimately, how do you hold down a job and keep these Sabbaths? And this is a serious question because this becomes a burden. I mean, it's already hard enough to get jobs where you're asking for Sabbaths off. It's already hard enough to get jobs where you have feast days with your Sabbaths that you have to take off. This would be a burden for me, and it doesn't seem correct. And we, again, know that Sabbath has never changed. So each month, if you follow this calendar, you're going to have to ask for different days of the week off, unless you're one of those fortunate people who are self-employed, because this changes throughout the year. Okay? It changes every single month. So while they're keeping what they call a 7-day pattern, it is actually not it. So if we count, if we count their days and their non-days, they're going to be discounting a day that Elohim has provided for us. So I think that's very interesting when they have these non-days. All right. So the lunar feasts and Sabbaths versus the Dead Sea Scrolls feasts and Sabbath. We have to take a look at some things. So according to those who follow the lunar calendar, the lunar Sabbaths, not the lunar calendar, the lunar Sabbatarians, their Sabbaths are each month they're on the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, and 29th. So going back here, so the 5th, these are different. These are different days because this is the Gregorian. But these Sabbaths are all on, this would be the 8th of the month, of their month. So the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, and 29th. Well, what's interesting is if you notice, I highlighted the number 15 because that we know the 15th day of the first month is unleavened bread, the first day of unleavened bread. So this is a holy convocation, a Sabbath day of rest. And they are also counting this as their regular weekly Sabbath. And again, this is where we have issues because nowhere in Scripture do we see anyone celebrating a feast day and a Sabbath day on the same day. So what does the Dead Sea Scrolls state about this? So if we look over at the Zadok calendar, according to the Dead Sea Scrolls, we have alternating months, but our Sabbaths are the same for months 1, 4, 7, and 10. These are our Sabbath days, and these are listed throughout the Dead Sea Scrolls in several locations. In months 2, 5, 8, and 11, these are our Sabbaths. Months 3, 6, 9, and 12, these are our Sabbath days. So these days do not match anywhere in here. So if somebody says they hold a lot of weight for the Dead Sea Scrolls, and yet their calendar doesn't look anything like what the Zadok priests kept, then I think they need to look into this just a little bit more. All right, something we also have to note is, what does Scripture tell us that we need to observe? We need to observe the seventh day. It is a Sabbath to Yahweh, and we don't do no work on it, right? I have another video that I put out that I also mentioned that the Sabbaths have never changed, and you're going to find more of those historical and biblical proofs. I'm not going to get into all of it today, but I did go through all of the requirements for Sabbath, and I point out throughout history that it hasn't changed, right? So we've never known any other day to be established as the Sabbath. According to Exodus 20, verse 11, it says, "For in 6 days Yahweh made the heaven and earth and the sea and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Therefore Yahweh blessed the Sabbath day and sanctified it." So if we are observing a Sabbath day on a Sunday or Monday, it's not the Sabbath day. So we are not resting on the correct day. So that is considered an abomination to the Father. Here we have Exodus 16:25 through 26. "And Moses said, Eat that today, for today is the Sabbath to Yahweh. Today you shall not find in the field. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the seventh day, which is the Sabbath, none shall be in it." Again, we are going to have 6 days where they have the manna coming, right? And then on the seventh day, they don't get any. Well, that doesn't work for non-days. So if we're trying to figure out the lunar Sabbath keepers in their calendar, we have to accommodate for a non-day somewhere in there. That doesn't make sense. How do we have a non-day? Does the Father give us manna or not give us manna on the non-day? Doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. So we can't make things up that do not exist. There is no scripture proof that there was something called a non-day or a day that was neither a Sabbath nor a work day. So their cycles can stop and restart based on the moon cycle and where it is in their month. And again, they're stopping and starting, and their new moon days or non-days are neither counted as Sabbath or work day. Can be so confusing. What do you do on those days? It doesn't even make sense. Doesn't make sense. We are told to not alter anything that the Father establishes, and this is altering it. If you're counting a day or not counting a day that the Father established, that's cause for concern. All right. Another thing that they do not understand is the whole concept of the word Chodesh. And again, I'm not going to go through this, but those who are following the lunar or Luni-Solar calendars are doing so because of mistranslations. The word Chodesh means month, not moon. And these folks are confusing their calendar based on a lie, based on a translation error, based on lies that have been put in there and words that have been changed. Okay, so a lot of us keeping the Zadok calendar have been recently trying to share far and wide what Scripture says and showing everyone that there are different words for moon and month. And it has been strewn out there and being taught as truth when that is not the word that is being used. Chodesh means month, folks. All right. So I'm going to give you a short snippet here. Hopefully this works. Me and my computer savviness is rather humiliating sometimes, but I'm going to try this out here. I'm going to push play and see what happens.
You'll find anything saying it's a 3-day celebration. It's a day, new moon day, right? But the month of Abib has many days. And so it would be far more likely that we're talking about the month of Abib, which could be celebrated for 3 days. Also notice that David and Jonathan knew exactly when that month would start. They didn't wait to sight a sliver of a moon. They said tomorrow is.
Okay, so this was a video that we see that the Assembly of Yahweh posted a while back when they were looking into the Lunar Sabbaths. And he was identifying the words Chodesh versus Yaryak, which is Chodesh again means month. Yaryak means moon. And there's also another word that's thrown around, and that's Chodesh. And forgive me if I'm mispronouncing it. Chodesh means new or to renew. So there's a difference between the words that are being thrown out there. And so we have confusion and chaos because people are being given the incorrect definition. And so when you look at the scriptures and it says the new month, the new moon, they did this. On the new moon, this happened. When in reality, if you were to look those words up in the Strong's Concordance, you're going to find that it does not, in fact, say on the new moon they did this and that. It's the new month. All right, so why I reject the lunar Sabbath doctrine. Number one is there is no scriptural evidence for the lunar Sabbath. None. Zero. Not even a single scripture. They cannot prove to me what phase the moon was on the first day of Abib, or any month for that matter. They do not hallow the seventh day. They do not make it a Sabbath unto the Father. They are altering the Sabbath day and putting it on any day of the week. They ignore the mistranslation of the new moon, and the new moon does not determine, the moon at all, I should say, the moon does not determine a week or a Sabbath, and we are warned in the book of Jubilees and other texts in the scrolls to not follow the moon for our calendar. And there are a lot of people, even recently, who used to follow the book of Jubilees and used to think that it was scripture, but they no longer follow it, mostly because their calendar is in the crosshairs. All right. All right, now we're going to be talking about those who keep the lunar calendar or Luni-Solar Calendar. So this is different than the lunar Sabbatarians who follow the 4 quarters of the moon and observe on those 4 days. This is the Luni-Solar Calendar. We know many people call it the Jewish calendar, the Hebrew calendar. It can also be under the same category with the Halil 2 calendar. And they all follow pretty much the same thing. So this is what the majority of Torah keepers are using, but I'm seeing a lot more come over to the Zadok calendar, so that's really exciting. This is the calendar that is being used in the land that we call Israel over there. And so this can be whether you follow the calendar based on the new moon, the absence of the moon, or the sighting of or the sliver of. There are variations to what is called the new moon, whether it's a sliver or whether it's the lack thereof. All right. Here are the things that the Luni-Solar or lunar calendar keepers believe. They believe the first day of the year can be on any day of the week. Sabbaths and feast days can overlap. They say the moon determines the month. They can add a 13th month every once in a while also to catch up. Their year, again, is also 354 days up to 384 days, depending on if they are adding that 13th month. And again, there are some who follow the Halil 2 calendar, and they also work around the Abib barley to see if it's ripe, and that's when they start to begin their year. Now, a positive thing that I will say about these Luni-Solar calendar keepers is that they follow a Saturday Sabbath. So as I discussed in my Zadok calendar series, these calendars are, number 1, Babylonian based. Number 2, again, they're mistranslating Chodesh, which actually means month, not moon. And then they have people who are sticking to the Jewish calendar because that's what they are doing over in that land over there. And so whatever they're doing must be accurate, correct? All right. So what I have found in my research is that there is absolutely no evidence that Jerusalem used a lunar or Luni-Solar calendar before Babylon. Some misconstrued ideas circulate that using, the barley to determine Abib is what it is spoken about in Scripture. That has no bearing on the calendar. Yes, it happens during the spring. That is a sign of spring, of course, right? Conundrum that they have right now is that barley isn't always ripe around the same time, right? And what's interesting about my research into Israel and their barley is that they're actually modifying their barley to ripen at different times. So look into some scientific articles about what they're doing to their barley. So how are they going to tell when the barley is ripe per Yahweh versus their manipulation of the seeds that they're putting in, the geoengineering that's being done over there? So again, if you look into the calendar that they're following and when it came about, I believe it was in the 4th century, they determined that this is going to be the calendar that we're going to follow. Well, what did they follow before? What did they follow in the Second Temple? Why was the Second Temple overthrown? What happened to the Zadokites? Why did they leave Jerusalem? And I go over that in great detail in the Damascus document and other documents that I have talked about. The Hebrew calendar that is being used in that land over there, and obviously by fellow believers, is a Babylonian pagan calendar. And I just want you to dig in for yourself as well. I'm going to give you some information here, and perhaps that can get you started on your journey if you haven't done so. Here is an example of how the lunar calendar works, and this is an example of a calendar that is being used. The lunar calendar is usually based on the sighting of the new moon, so they rely on human witnesses to the moon. Now, if the moon isn't sighted because maybe they have bad weather, they have to wait until the next night or the next night after that. So their calendars almost have to pause and wait for that sighting, and the feast can change if the sighting is postponed. So that's what that video clip was about. It was talking about when David was out in the field and not at the table. It said that they knew when the feast day they knew when Abib 1 was going to happen. They didn't have to go out and sight for the moon and wait to start their calendar. They knew it was coming because they knew the calculations of their calendar. So their calendar, because they have to have the human witness of the sliver of the moon, it means that their months and their calendar can change mid-calendrical cycle, because their second month, they might not observe the moon at the right time. So that's very unfortunate. Again, the positive here is that they do follow the Saturday Sabbath. But unfortunately, their months can start any day of the week, and their Sabbaths and their feast days can overlap depending on the moon's phase and how their month started. And again, their year equals 354 days, and they will add a 13th month to keep their calendar within the seasons. So they have to alter their calendar. All right. So if you take a look over here, let me get my little pin pointer back out. If you take a look here, again, they're keeping the 7th day Shabbat. And again, their days are not going to match what the Dead Sea Scrolls tell us to keep as well. So their days are going to be different. So for example, March 2025, their first day of Abib was March 31st. That was their new moon. And they do count these days as the first day of their calendar. And then their second month was the 29th of April. Again, they count that in their months, unlike the lunar Sabbatarians. Now, here is an example of the witness factor that can alter the whole start of their year for their calendar. And this is a post that I found on the Zadok calendar. It's a text that I found. Unfortunately, I do not remember where I found it, so I'm not taking credit for it. It is someone who posted about what they observed in 2016 from a Jewish Hebrew calendar keeper. So his notes at the bottom, and we'll get there in just a moment. Let's see here. At the top it says, Pesach 2016 proves the fallibility of the lunar calendar. So these are not my words. This is the person who follows the Zadok calendar. He says the following declaration was issued by a Karaite, Nehemiah Gordon, concerning Pesach in 2016. Now, I find Nehemiah Gordon useful in a lot of things. He has a lot of great information, but some of his information is off. and I disagree with some of it. But here is an example that he posted on I believe it was Facebook. And so this is what he wrote on a Facebook post, I believe it was, or a website post. I cannot remember. It said, new moon not sighted so far. So far, no one has sighted the new moon on Friday, April 8th, 2016. It should have been an easy sighting, but there was significant haze over Israel. We have reports of the moon not being sighted from Jerusalem, Kiryat Atta, wherever Peoria, Tiberias, and Arad. There are still other observers who need to report in. Some of these reports might not come in until Sunday. So at this point, we have to wait to hear what people saw or didn't see on Friday night. I will post more reports as I receive them on my Facebook page. Earlier today, we went down to the Jordan Valley and found that the barley was Aviv. Much was already harvest ripe, as expected, based on what we saw a couple of weeks ago in the northern Negev. If it turns out no one saw the new moon on April 8, 2016, the Passover, or unleavened bread, will be Saturday night, April 23, 2016. If we receive reliable reports that the new moon was sighted on April 8, 2016, then Passover will begin Friday night, April 22nd. We still need to wait to hear from other observers at this point. The photo excluded at the top of this image is the sun setting over Jerusalem, partially obscured by the haze, April 8, 2016. Nehemiah Gordon, Jerusalem, Israel. Okay, so this gentleman who keeps the Zadok calendar wrote this text here at the bottom. And it says, note the possibility for Pesach to begin on a Friday night, and for the evening to evening advocates, Friday evening is the start of the weekly Sabbath on which, according to Judaism, there is to be no cooking. Consequently, to keep Pesach, that is, to cook the Pesach, these people must break Torah to keep Torah. If Pesach is Saturday evening, the same situation applies for the morning to morning adherents. This situation repeated itself in 2022. Yahweh is an exact Elohim. When he set sacred time and sacred worship in motion, all was synchronized to perfection. There were no clashes of his Sabbaths. Clashes such as this are impossible with Enoch-Zadok solar calendar. I applaud this gentleman. This was very good insight. So, the set-apart differences between these calendars and the Zadok calendar is that we do not need the moon to determine anything. We do not need human witnesses and the lack thereof a great visual in the sky to tell us when our months are going to begin. All right, the phase of the moon does tell us a lot of information, but we do not need it to wait to celebrate our months. Okay, so you can see the conundrum with keeping of the human element to their calendar. So let's take a look at another human element that is accompanied with this form of calendar. Now, when looking into the moon and new moon calendars, I came across something very troubling. This information that I found while researching the new moon celebrations and beginnings of the month had everything to do with occult connections. I found Wiccan and pagan rituals surrounding the new moons. And here is a brief screenshot that I took, and it was very challenging for me to put this on here and even read it, but I'm going to read it. This was on a website called the Magical Circle School. And this is what they say in regards to the new moon. The new moon energy itself is only available for 24 hours, which happens the day after the dark moon. The moon will hold its first illumination of the lunar cycle, which sets the tone of energy for the month to come. Setting intents to gradually manifest over this period are beneficial to this phase. Anything to do with new beginnings, focuses, goals, and ventures, etc., are another strong influence. Okay. And another website in regards to new moons, they said, one of the beautiful things about living with the moon is that each month we get the opportunity to reset, reevaluate, and set intentions for the month ahead. This time is the new moon. The new moon energy is conducive to resting, receiving downloads from the universe, and checking in with yourself. Think of it as a New Year's Day to you get to have every month. That you get to have every month. One way to celebrate the new moon is to do rituals. So then I looked up types of moon worship, and it said moon worship can take various forms, from simple rituals to elaborate ceremonies. Some cultures practice moon-related rituals or festivals throughout the year. Here are some of the most common forms of moon worship, and this was the first one on the list: lunar festivals. Lunar festivals are celebrations held at specific times throughout the year to honor the moon. These festivals are often accompanied by rituals such as dancing, singing, feasting, and offering to the gods. The most famous example is the Chinese Moon Festival. Well, I'm going to show you another very famous festival. And this is Judaism's sight of the new moon. And I took this literally from Chabad.org, and it says, being grateful for the moon is akin to greeting God. So that's very interesting, just stopping there. Is looking at the new moon akin to meeting your Elohim? I don't know about that. And then they go on to say, every month Jewish people recite a special blessing known as the Kiddush Levana as they witness the moon reemerge and grow full again. Blessing the month in its time is comparable, listen to this, to greeting the divine presence, said the sages of the Talmud. So again, is looking at the new moon and the sighting of the new moon comparable to your divine Elohim? I think not. But doesn't their description here sound a lot like the other descriptions that I just read? So what are you doing on the days of the sightings of the new moon? Are you dancing? Blowing your shofars? I personally do not want to worship the creation and celebrate the new moon. Rather, I want to celebrate our Creator. Deuteronomy 4:19 says, unless thou lift up thine eyes unto heaven, and when thou seest the sun and the moon and the stars, even all the hosts of heaven, shouldest be driven to worship them and serve them, which Yahweh your Elohim has divided unto all nations under the whole heaven. So again, it might not seem like worship of the moon, but if you see folks celebrating this event each month, especially with dancing and singing and blowing shofars, I would step back and take a look into the meaning of what they're doing and what it looks like. Okay? So why I reject the lunar or Luni-Solar calendars. Historical facts that this calendar was used pre-Babylon is not found. There is scriptural proof that we cannot worship creation. They also ignore the mistranslation of the new moon. They cannot prove what phase of the moon was on the first day of Abib, or any month for that matter. There's no evidence of new moon celebrations pre-going into Babylon, pre-pagan worship in Jerusalem. The moon does not determine a week or a Sabbath, and we are warned in Jubilees and other texts not to follow the moon for our months. So now we're going to move on to the Zadok calendar with the equinox start. So again, yes, there are versions of the Zadok calendar, and this is one of them. These folks are using what they call the Zadok calendar, but they are suggesting that each year begins on the equinox. And my understanding is that this is not lining up with the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Zadok calendar, so I do not believe they can be calling it a Zadok calendar. Definitely different from what I observe, and we'll get into that in just a moment. All right, so this is what they believe. They say that the equinox determines the year, that the first day of the year can be any day of the week. Sounds familiar, right? The seventh day can be any day of the week, 3 days after the start date or whatever day of the week that is. And I'll get into that explanation in a moment. And they say that the Sabbath days can be different every year. And then their year, they say it's a 364-day calendar because that's what the Zadokites kept. But in reality, they are actually keeping a 365 to 366 day calendar per the equinox. All right. So again, these are folks who are calling themselves Zadok calendar keepers, yet they begin their year with the equinox rather than a Wednesday like most of us do, because that's what we read in the scrolls. They start on the equinox, and their years can start on any day of the week because the equinox can be on any day of the week, right? And they continue to that, it moves every year to a different day of the week. So this means their Sabbaths can change every year. So the Lunar Sabbatarians, their Sabbaths changed every month. Well, the equinox start folks, their Sabbaths change yearly. So on one year so I believe in 2025, their seventh day is Sunday. So next year, their Sabbath days will be on Monday, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be mistaken on that one. So I don't understand how they can call themselves Zadok calendar keepers, because the commonalities with Zadok calendar is that there is always a Wednesday start and a Saturday Sabbath. So the Zadok calendar is based on the Dead Sea Scrolls. So if you follow what is explained in there, you cannot begin a year on any other day than the fourth day. And the Sabbath day will always be what we know as Saturday. No other day is known or has been known as the seventh day, as I'm probably going to keep repeating. So I'll get to this. I get to this in more detail in my Zadok calendar series, so you want to check on that, on how we start our years. So if you follow a 364-day calendar, you cannot start with an equinox and then go to the next equinox. So I plugged in some dates here. I plugged in March. Let me get my little pointer out here. All right, so I plugged in March 20th of 2025 and March 20th of 2026. So if we say that the equinox is on March 20th of next year, which it is, this is actually 365 days, not 364. And then some people will actually count the last day in their reckoning. So this, if you count March 20th to March 20th of 2025 to 2026, and you count the end date, you're actually going to get 366. So whether you do or you don't, neither of these are going to get you to 364 days in your year. So the only way that they would be able to get a 364-day year is if the equinox next year was on March 19th. And then alternating to the 20th, and then alternating back to the 19th. That doesn't happen. It's not the case. All right, so they also suggest that the fourth day of creation was an equinox. There's no proof. We weren't there. We do not have proof that the fourth day of creation, when the Father put the sun and the moon in the sky, we have no idea what phase of the moon it was, nor do we know if it was an equinox. We don't know, right? Okay, so I originally found a group that I thought was following the Zadok calendar. I was really excited, right, that there were more folks joining in. But when I looked closer at their calendar, I saw something. So I just overall looked and I saw, oh, their fourth day. They started the month on the fourth day, the head of their month. And then I looked a little bit further. I was trying to think, well, how did they get March 20th? That's a Thursday. How do they put a Thursday in a Wednesday spot? Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Their Wednesday is over here. How did they put a Thursday in that spot? It doesn't make any sense, right? Okay, so when I looked closer, they placed the head of the year, the day of the equinox, in the fourth day slot. Okay, so for them, they put whatever day it is, it could be a Sunday or a Saturday, whatever day the equinox falls on, they put it in the fourth day spot. This fourth day spot. And they don't recognize the Roman given names of the days of the week. Obviously, we don't like it either, but that's just what we know them as. So instead of the March 19th going in the fourth day spot, they're shifting it over. Okay, does that make sense what they're doing? So, yeah, so whatever day the equinox is on is what they're going to put it in. So next year, I haven't looked into it. Next year, it might be, I think it's Monday. Who knows? I can't remember. But they're just shifting it. Okay? They're ignoring the days of the week that are given to us. And they're ignoring it. And they're just putting the equinox in that first slot. All right. So whatever Roman day the equinox lands on is the first day, whether it's a Monday, Tuesday, and then so 2025, their day one was March 20th, which was a Thursday, and they put it in the fourth day slot. Okay. Now they think that just because they put it in the fourth day slot, that they're going to have their Sabbath 4 days later. Or sorry, 3 days later. So we would normally put our Sabbath 3 days after the head of the month of Abib. But look at the day that their Sabbath falls on. So we would normally say March 19th would have been here, which was a Wednesday. They're putting their Thursday here. So what happens 3 days later? This is actually a Sunday in the seventh spot. These are all Sundays. So their Sabbaths for March of 2025 and throughout the rest of the year is going to be on a Sunday. Next year, again, I believe it's on a Monday. So what about, this is my honest question, what about all of those Saturday Sabbath keepers who lost their lives keeping the Saturday Sabbath? They didn't blend in with the Sunday Sabbath keepers. So you're going to tell me that, oh, there was only 1 year that they all got caught because they were observing Sabbath on a different year. I mean, so many people lost their lives because they chose to do Saturday Sabbath rather than a Sunday Sabbath. Does that make sense? If it was 2025 and persecution was going around, they would blend in this year because they're keeping Saturday or Sunday Sabbath. But next year, it's going to be a Monday. Doesn't make sense, right? People lost their lives protecting the Saturday Sabbath. It has never changed. You can't just shift things around and make it okay. That's what really bothers me. All right. So they have I'm posting this up here, a 4-year cycle for their equinox. The spring equinox has a 4-year cycle. It goes March 20th, March 20th, March 20th, then it goes to March 19th. Okay. But again, if you go March 20th to March 20th, it's a 365 day change. Then you go from March 20th to March 20th, another 365 day, not 364. Then the third March 20th, 365, and then you have a March 19th in there. That's going to give you 366 days. So where are they getting a 364-day calendar? They're not. Okay, they cannot say they're following a Zadok-based calendar with 365 or 366 days. The parameters for the equinox tells us the week that we can begin our year, but it must fall on the closest Wednesday. So if you choose to put it on any other day, you are adding to the pattern rather than keeping it. So we learn from the scrolls that it must be a Wednesday, a 4th day, to follow the pattern. No, they don't say it is a Wednesday because that term, that Roman name was not given until, or I don't know, Greek, Roman, Wednesday, whatever, wasn't given until after this was written. They are shifting their Sabbath, so they are defying Leviticus 23 when it talks about working 6 days and resting on the Sabbath. They're shifting it year after year so they can actually have a defiance of the law because they're doing it on a different day. This is why I reject the equinox to equinox, is that there is no proof there was an equinox on day 4 of creation. They do not calculate a 364-day only calendar. We cannot just shift any day into the 4th day of week and call it good. And then the Sabbath has always been a Saturday. If you don't want to call it Saturday, fine. The Sabbath day has always been the 7th day. Okay? So then we have those who are also following the Zadok calendar. I'm just going to cover a couple of things. The straight line Zadok calendar, which isn't a problem really. I'll just explain that in a moment. And those who are following what I'm calling a computer program driven start calendar. We'll get into that in a moment. All right. So I stated this in my other Zadok calendar videos. While the straight line method can help you determine the fact that the equinox has happened or not, it does not have bearing on the start date of the Zadok calendar. Ultimately, the equinox will be on the 19th or the 20th of every year, according to the Gregorian calendar. The straight line is just a calculation, a visual experiment that you can do. It's interesting, maybe fun to do, but it really isn't necessary anymore if you know the Gregorian date. You can do it. Again, it'll help you, but it's usually going to be the 19th or the 20th. But again, if you know the Gregorian date, it's a pretty simple task. You don't have to do this. All right. But let's just say you just came out from under a rock and you don't know what, where you are in the calendar. Sure, you're going to want to get out your little level and your ruler or whatnot and start tracking it. Okay. But it's not necessary at this time. Now there's been recently a big divide in the Zadok calendar in regarding to intercalating. Some chose to follow an intricate computer data with some various charts, the Naval Observatory, and some NASA data that was generated by, may I say, one person. And because this one person presented it on a popular channel, others ended up following suit without even seeking out why some of us were not intercalating in 2025. Many people don't go into the extreme of calculating data on, with their computer for the calendar. And so it was really a complicated video. It went way over my head in many places. But many people just went along with this data because who can argue with computer data, right? And figures that are given to us by NASA. But this is where it got a bit tangled and twisted. And another group presented this data from this one gentleman. And there were some other added inaccuracies in their presentation. And it's very sad with what happened based on one person's data, and everyone believed that one person. So the theory that they have with the Zadok intercalation dates is how to start their year. So some say that if the equinox falls after a Wednesday, then we must intercalate to the next week. So based on this data, some people intercalated in 2025. So my note here is that they did not use the sun, moon, and stars for this reckoning. Otherwise, they would have known that Aries was already in the sky for almost a whole week. So their calendar was going to be off. Okay. So there's a lot of misguidance. I went over in my Zadok videos about Aries being the beginning zodiac that comes out at the beginning of the year. And there's very many inaccuracies on some NASA driven apps that show Pisces. And so there were some Torah keeping channels that were stating that the year begins in Pisces, which is very inaccurate. Okay. So a lot of things wrong with the videos that came out before 2025. First of all, I believe that our ancestors, yes, they had some unknown and lost technologies, but I don't believe they needed a computer to calculate the calendar. In fact, the Zadok calendar is so precise on its own that we do not need human or computer to intervene. There's no calculations that are necessary. It's always the same pattern. But if we're going to follow data that's out there, and a few inaccuracies, then we're going to be led astray. The sun is not in Pisces. And again, I have tried my hardest to bring this information to the forefront. NASA has been pushing a narrative that every so often that the sun moves into a new age or a new zodiac for a time. They're literally changing data everywhere to now say that the sun is in Pisces for the spring instead of Aries. And I'm going to tell you, I'm using some nice words. My husband said, "Really? That's all you're going to say?" I said, "I could use a lot harsher words, but it's utter nonsense, folks." Our ancients knew that the sun always went into Aries for the spring, for the start of the year. So being that there are a lot of people following this NASA information or misinformation is utter nonsense. You need to get out your astrolabes. You need to go outside and check it out for yourself. All the luminary movements can only be based on an Aries start. And I'm not going to get into too far here, but there is something called the first point of Aries. And it is usually within a couple of degrees that Aries can shift. 1, 2, maybe, and I'm going to even say a 3-degree shift because it varies between year to year based on if we are, Well, anyway, I'll explain that in details another time. But we can vary based on the Gregorian calendar and the intercalation that we're going to do. So it can be off anywhere from 1 to 3 degrees. Okay. If you look online, you're going to find multiple facts about the first point of Aries always aligning with spring. Always. But what's interesting is recently when I went to go and take some screenshots and write down some information, I'm noticing a trend online that everything now says it's in Pisces. And that was not the case a year ago when I began, maybe a year and a half ago when I began my research. It did not say Pisces. This is new. Let me tell you, they're putting in some new information. So I'm about to show you what happens if you're off because of intercalation. Okay, so you should go outside and look for yourself. Don't trust my words. Get an astrolabe that is based on ancient technologies that is still accurate today. If you get the astrolabe, I forgot to mention this, but if you get the astrolabe, you need to make sure that it's just like the ancient ones. All of the ancient ones are accurate, and I have proven accuracy. I've gone out myself and proven that they are still accurate. But when you get your astrolabe, you have to get one for your latitude, but you also need to make sure that they haven't changed it to a Pisces start. And I'm going to say that only the newer ones say Pisces. Again, it's some kind of narrative that is being pushed right now, and it's not good. It's not good news. I don't know why. I haven't figured it out yet. But when you get an astrolabe, you need to get one that is for your latitude and that starts with the equinox at Aries. Okay, our ancients used tools like this, and those same ancient tools, I have looked at ones that are hundreds of years old and thousands of years old and are still accurate today. So if they're going to tell you that the sun is now in Pisces to begin our year, that is malarkey. Again, that's me putting it gently. All right. Let me see. Did I miss something? No. Yes, I did. So the point of Aries, again, like I said, was able to shift 1 to 3 degrees. And I want you to take a look at this next chart here. So this is an app I've mentioned many times. It's an app that I love to share. But unfortunately, it's only available on iPhones right now. And this app is called the Moon Calendar and Moon Phases. And it's terrific. And I think it is very accurate, and especially compared to other NASA apps. And when I say NASA apps, I'm saying ones that are using their data based off of based off of NASA. And that would be Stellarium. There's another one I have called Stars Tonight, I believe. And again, they're using NASA data. But I have actually used those apps, gone outside, looked up at the sky, and seen something different in the sky than what those apps are telling me I should be looking at. So I've been able to prove them incorrect just with my astrolabe going outside. And yes, some people say, well, can you do it without an astrolabe? I'm not an expert yet by any means, and I'm still working on it. However, I have been able to go out and identify certain zodiacs in the sky in different locations than what those apps are telling me. So I get out my handy dandy astrolabe and I'm proving them wrong. Okay. So in this app, they have, and this is a screenshot if you're interested in getting it. It does cost money, but it's totally worth it, and it's very inexpensive. I think it's a couple bucks. All right. In this app, they have what they call it the clock of life, and it is a 360-degree circle that shows the constellation wheel, and it highlights where the sun is in the sky and where the moon is in the sky and which zodiacs they're in. So again, it's 360, so there's a tick for each movement that it makes throughout the year. Okay, so we have, for example, this was March 19th of 2025. Okay? Now, March 19th of 2025, it is straight up, right? 360 or 0, whichever one you want to look at. So we have, March 19th. Yeah, there we go. That evening, this was done before midnight, right? So they're working on a midnight is the new day. So at midnight, I should have done that. I should have changed it to the time. I think I can change the time. But I'm showing here March 19th at 360. It's about to switch over. So it's about to go over into Aries for the year. And then they have the moon in white in Sagittarius that evening, okay? So every constellation takes up 30 degrees, right? So they're switching over. They're about to switch over at midnight. It'll say Aries. I really should have done that. I didn't think about that. The reason why I took this screenshot is to show you the different intercalation methods, okay? So, let's see here. Let me look at, I wanted to look at my notes, sorry. So here I have the the Zadok calendar based on the luminaries. This is what I'm following here. And I'm basing the year off of when Aries goes into the sky. So March 19th, 2025 is my first day of 2025. It was at a 0 degree difference. So that means I started it based off of a March 19th start date. I was off by 0. Okay, and then the next year, this is 2026. My year will begin on March 18th. And then I'm just going down all the way to the year 2037. Now, my degrees of differences from Aries is very low. Remember how I said that the point of Aries is only anywhere from 1 to 3 degrees difference? Look at 0, -2, -3, 3, 2, 0, -1. And the highlights are my years that I'm intercalating. So here I'm intercalating in 2028 and 2034. And I'm off by 3 degrees and 2 degrees. Okay, so I'm not off based on where Aries is in the sky, based on this app here that is very accurate. Okay, now we have those who intercalated this year and went ahead a whole week. So their year started on March 26th, 2025. So here we have, if you can look at this wheel, they're already well into Aries on this day. So if you take a look, this is their intercalation. If they see that the equinox is Wednesday or after, I believe, they go a whole week ahead, right? Instead of staying within the same week as the equinox. So they're shifting a full week ahead. Now notice the difference. Remember, the first point of Aries was only 1 to 3 degrees off. Look at how far off they are from Aries start. So this is showing that they went ahead too far this year. Okay, so this is pointing out the accuracy that the luminaries do matter. Where the sun is in the sky, in the particular luminary that it's in, is showing you where we're off when we intercalate. So if you want to intercalate with the right year, you shouldn't be more than -3 degrees off. You shouldn't be. So look how far off they are. So they intercalate 2025. This is when they intercalated this year. They're going to intercalate in 2031 and 2036. So they're intercalating a whole other time before I am, because they're not following the stars, the zodiacs. So again, here is an issue that I have and why I didn't intercalate this year. So the Zadok Enoch calendar requires the luminaries. So if in my other calendar series, you saw that I refer to the signs in the heaven, and we must be within the time frame of the equilux and equinox. So we should not move a week ahead of all of these things. So we have the Big Dipper telling us the seasons. We have the zodiacs in the correct places, and the sun needs to be in the correct zodiac. Again, it was not in Pisces. So we see what happened when the other group intercalated in 2025. So they shifted forward 1 week past the equilux and past Aries entering in the east and well past the equinox, and put their start date in the middle of the following week. So they have nothing merging or converging. So according to my understanding, the year must begin when these signs are merging. So if we do it too early or too late, we're missing the pattern. So this is why I've been trying to educate calendar seekers on the astrolabe. The astrolabe shows proof of Yah's calendar always beginning in Aries for the equinox. It actually proves that the calendar is fixed and always has been, because you can use the astrolabe, you can use an astrolabe from 2,000 years ago and it's still accurate today. So this proves that the equinox parameters and the zodiac's involvement in the timekeeping method. And it is a math equation that's already been solved. And you're going to get the same answer every year. You don't need a computer to generate some data for you. It's fixed, and it only varies with the intercalation. And when the equinox moves from 1 week into the next week, that's when we move. That's the only time that we intercalate, is when it goes into a Sunday, the next Sunday. So again, this is called the first point of Aries. This is your sign to start your year, and it shifts with the changing of the equinox. So that's how we're going to know when the year begins. So again, we can watch when the Big Dipper reveals the season. We can watch it because the equilux, we know that closes us out. So over on the right-hand side, I have how to end the year. According to Enoch, it says the last day of the 364-day year ends on a Tuesday. And then after equal parts, day and night. So that's the equilux. So we have to wait for all of these signs. We have to wait for the Dipper. We have to wait for the 364 days to end on a Tuesday. And then we need to wait for the equilux to happen, which is usually the 16th or the 17th of each month. I know I might be going a little bit too fast, but that is included in my other videos. And then we learned that a year begins on a Wednesday with the sun and the moon entering into the fourth gate, otherwise known as Aries gate or spring equinox. Okay, so it does matter. Aries point matters. The intercalating on the wrong year is going to throw you off, and we saw that with those numbers. So we can watch the Dipper, watch for the equilux, watch for Aries, setting, the sun setting in the fourth gate. We can see all of these things. The moon going down. Those are all bearing witness to when to start our year. Okay? So again, this is why I'm bringing up the astrolabe, because it's important. It's important to know that this is fixed. This data on this astrolabe is never changing. Okay? We don't need a calculation out there to tell us when to start our year. Okay? All right, so why I reject some Zadok intercalations is that they're not taking into consideration the sun, the moon, and the stars, the Mazaroths or the zodiacs. It is important, okay? Their calculations do not line up even with using their computer data, especially when NASA is involved. And then many people, as I mentioned with the introduction to this section, are following groups. They're following who they like to listen to, and maybe they just don't want to look into it themselves. They're not testing the information for themselves. So again, we need to reevaluate who were holding in high standard. People, someone with a fancy program, or Zadokites who actually wrote down information bearing witness to Enoch and Jubilees, right? Okay, so the Dead Sea Scrolls gave us parameters, and we have to use the sun, moon, and stars. All of them are required. So we have the Lunar Sabbatarians and Luni-Solar Calendar folks not using the sun and the stars. We have the Zadok calendar keepers who are doing some interesting things and mostly just using the sun. Again, we have some who are misguided with the Pisces start as well. We need to remember that the fourth day is a Wednesday, as we know. Day 3 of the new year will always be a Sabbath. The year is always 364 days. Feasts are never on a Sabbath. And the moon never determines the year or the month. As stated in my other videos, the month does bear witness to each month. And I'm not going to get into that today, but it has as much importance as the sun and the stars do to the calendar. Scriptural evidence. And again, if you don't believe Jubilees is scripture, I would ask that you test that as well. Jubilees 6:32 through 38 says, "Command the sons of Israel to observe the years according to this reckoning, 364 days, and these shall make up a complete year. But if they neglect the proper order and fail to observe them, then all the seasons will get out of order and the sequence of the year will be disturbed. Yet all the sons of Israel will forget and be ignorant of the progression of the years. They will forget the new moon festivals and Sabbaths." Now, what do you notice here? Jubilees, depending on the translator, you might actually see new moon here again. Now, this was me testing you because we actually have the Dead Sea Scrolls available, and the translators to this particular Jubilees translated Chodesh to new moon, whereas the Dead Sea Scrolls translator, for some reason, the Book of Jubilees was translated this verse and it says month instead of new moon. So have at it. If you have a Dead Sea Scrolls, take a look, and hopefully your translators of the copy that you have actually does say month instead of new moon. So let me read that again. "Yet all the sons of Israel will forget and be ignorant of the progression of the years, and they will forget the months and the festivals and Sabbaths." Okay, so here's more scriptural evidence from the book of Enoch. Chapter 74, 13 through 16. "For the moon brings in all the years exactly, that their stations may come neither too forwards nor too backwards a single day, but that the years may be changed with correct precision in 364 days. So, folks, Jubilees and Enoch confirm each other. In 3 years, the days are 1,092. 5 years, they are 1,820, and in 8 years, 2,912 days. To the moon alone belong in 3 years 1,062 days. In 5 years, it has 50 days less, for an additional being made to the 62 days. In 5 years, there are 1,072 days. And the days of the moon in 8 years are 2,832 days. For its days in 8 years are less 80 days, which 80 days are its diminution in 8 years. The year then becomes truly complete according to the station of the moon and the station of the sun, which rise in the gates, which rise and set in them for 30 days. So here is Enoch explaining the calendar. And he says that the moon brings in the years exactly in their stations. So we have the lunar stations of the moon. So if you calculate 3 years, 5 years, and 8 years, you're going to have 1,092 days for a 3-year time frame, or 1,820 and 2,912. Okay, so then we also see the solar calendar, the year 3, 5, and 8. And then we see the lunar calendar, 1062, 1770, and 2832. So the only one that bears witness to the correct days is the first one. Here's more evidence that I have in the scrolls. There's a lot, but this is just one of many. The Apocryphal Psalms of David, the Dead Sea Scrolls 4Q88. It states that David made 364 songs, one for each day of the year. Think about that. He made a song for each day of the year, and he only made 364. He made 52 Sabbath songs. Not any more than that. He made 12 new month songs. And he made 30 songs for festival days and the Day of Atonement. What do you see here? Do you see a 13th month in there? No. Do you see more than 364 days? Do you see a 365 days or 66 days? I don't. And then we have the 30 songs for the festival days. And I thought to myself, ooh, I think I can show you that. So I think that's interesting. Take a look. This is the feast days for 2025. I had put them in a little chart here, and I counted. Remember, it said 30 with including the Day of Atonement, 30 feast or festival days. So I went and I looked and I counted them up. Abib, Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits of barley, Shavuot, second Passover, first fruits of wine, first fruits of oil and wood, Feast of Trumpets, Day of Atonement, and Sukkot. Now, if you think about it, unleavened bread has 7 days. Sukkot has 8 days. You count them all up, there's 30 Moedim, 30 festivals, 30 songs that David wrote, including the Day of Atonement in there. It's all accurate. And I think what's really exciting is when I added them together, first fruits of wine, oil, and wood are included in those 30 days. Pretty exciting. All right, Enoch 82 describes the sun and the stars as leaders, not the moon. So if you've been following me in the Dead Sea Scrolls studies, you know that over 40% of the scrolls are calendrical. This doesn't even scratch the surface for other calendar proofs. And we know that parts of Jubilees and Enoch were found in the scrolls, right? Did you know that some of the scrolls were found outside of the Qumran caves? They were found, some of the same writings that we found in the caves were found in the Middle East, Asia, and Europe. Some of them were even calendrical scrolls that people are trying to deny, right? Did you know that there were Paleo-Hebrew inscriptions found in the United States that prove the Aries start for the year? Well, you probably know that if you watch my videos, because I think that's very interesting and very important. It's not just the elected Zadokites. This was taught throughout Israel, and it's been passed down through generations. And because all the persecution that happened through the years, most of those who held these truths were forced to convert or die, right? There was only a remnant that kept these calendars and this information because they were able to hide or evade death, right? Enoch 75 verse 9 says, the conductors of the days and nights, the sun, the moon, stars, and all of the ministers of heaven, which make their circuit with all of the chariots of heaven. Enoch is telling us that this circuit matters. Or else why did he write all of his sections about the calendar, about the luminaries? He left us evidence In the commentaries in Genesis, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, we actually read about the days of the week of Noah's journey from start to finish. It literally tells you what days of the week things happen. Go take a look at your Dead Sea Scrolls commentaries on Genesis. Jubilees chapter 5 also is confirming what happened to Noah. And these confirm each other, that this is in fact truth. The thing that you see on the right-hand side is a screenshot from one of my Zadok videos. When does the year begin? And it says, Genesis 1:14 through 15 says, And Elohim said, Let lights come into the firmament of the heavens, and separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and appointed times, and for days and years, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven, and give light on the earth. And it came to be so. We have an account outside of Enoch, outside of Jubilees, outside of the Dead Sea Scrolls, that tell us that we need to use the sun, the moon, and the stars. And they're all important. Okay? A lot has come around the last few years. The Zadok calendar has become a bigger story. It had been hidden for quite some time, right? It's just recently that it's had the reemergence, and a lot of people are afraid of it. But I think that what has been hidden has become renewed and refreshed, and it needs to be shown to others. The scrolls prophesy that in the last days that the Zadokites would reemerge. Now, I'm not saying we're priests, but I do believe that this is part of prophecy, that we are going back to the old ways. And don't be afraid of looking into these things. So if you listen to your gut, that these scrolls are for a future generation, then you need to understand the weightier matters of the calendar. Don't just follow the crowd, but test it. Test the calendar. Look at the sky and find out how it all connects, because it does. And the Zadokites did. They looked at the stars, the sun, the moon, and the stars. It all mattered. So if you have not done so, I have a 2-part series on the Zadok calendar, along with past links on how to look at the sky and verify these things. I have some tutorials on the astrolabe. Don't take my words for it. Go out and search it for yourself. Test everything. Otherwise, you're just going to continue to help push this agenda of a calendar that might not be true. So, let's continue to fight for this truth and bring it to the forefront. Now, I've noticed that a lot of people have watched my part 1 of the Zadok calendar series, but not part 2. So go check that out as well and continue to work with me as we continue to fight for the truth. I hope that you've all learned something new today and refreshing. May you all be blessed.